Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Atheist Uprising. I'm your host, Joshua Void. Wow, and I forgot my name, obviously. Joshua Void, and I am so happy about this conversation that we're going to have today with Katy Sykes and also with Scott Williamson as well. But before we begin, I do want to thank everybody who's inside the comment section at this very moment. Thank you very much for coming in and listening to our discussions and conversations. It really does. It helps us big time. So thank you very much for finding interest in our show. Also, I do want to thank our Patreon supporters, Linear and TART, for really helping us do what we love doing, which is creating videos for you, the viewer. So now, before we commence, I just want to say that tonight's show, it might trigger individuals in certain ways. So if you think that that is the case, I still think that you should stay around because it will definitely help understand a whole new perspective and stuff like that, and how to really look at trans issues and everything like that, and also gender identity within religion in and of itself, or within religious organizations in general. So this is really going to be a really interesting conversation. So I really do think that, listen in and see if it can help you out in any way whatsoever. So without further ado, I want to welcome into the show Katy Sykes and Scott Williamson. Katy and Scott, how are you both?
Hello.
Doing wonderful. Glad to be here.
Right.
Yeah, me too. I'm glad to be here, as always.
So this conversation, what we're going to do is meld it into like one base, in a sense, where we're going to talk about the gender identity, but at the same time we're going to wrap it in with religiosity as well, and how difficult it is to really be truthful to your own gender identity when you are within organizations that only see the two gender positions, in a sense, your general basic, or what they think general basic genders, which are male and female predominantly. They don't necessarily want to focus on anything else outside of that, in a sense. And it's extremely difficult for people who are within that identity of being a biological male, but at this, or biological man, but at the same exact time identifying as a woman as well, and being a trans woman, and what that really, the stress that comes from that. So Katy, I would like to ask first question.
Yep.
During your time within Jehovah's Witness, did you feel, how can I say it, did you feel that there was this not disassociation, but a sort of, how can I say it, a distancing between like a male things, in a sense, you know? Like, did you feel more feminine when you were within Jehovah's Witness, or was that only after, when you came out of Jehovah's Witness or left Jehovah's Witness, then you started thinking into this more?
Yeah, so for me, I and this is something that I've only just like sort of, because I've started remembering stuff before I was 6-year-old, because if anyone watched my channel before, I was sexually abused as a child. So before the age of 6, I've sort of like blocked out a lot of there was just so much going on after that I sort of blocked out a lot of that memories. But I started remembering the last few years stuff before that, and so my trans identity started at a very young age. So when I was about 3-year-old, I can remember living at my grandmother's house, because I lived with my grandmother from the age of 3 to 6. And I remember walking around in her high heels, walking around with a handbag, wearing her tops and stuff as dresses and things like that, and looking at myself in the mirror and stuff, with wearing all of that, and enjoying that, enjoying the feminine side of myself, and that was about the age 3-4-year-old. So that started pretty young. I didn't really understand what that was, what that meant, and I started to understand a little bit about what that would mean for me at about age 6, and that's when I started sort of showing it a little bit more overtly, not sort of like doing it in private sort of thing, and actually being a little bit more confident with it. And that's when the sexual abuse started from my stepmother, but maybe we can get into that later on. Thing. But to answer your question, is within Jehovah's Witnesses, like going to the meetings, going to the on the field service and things like that, although I knew that I was different, knew that I didn't feel this masculinity, I couldn't show it within the actual organization. That would have been game over for me, because it would have meant all sorts of attention from the elders, from the circuit overseers, district overseers, all of that and everything. Plus I wouldn't even know how to say that to them. I mean, this is the thing that a lot of people don't understand about trans people. We don't know any more than anybody else about trans issues when we're young, and that it still is just as confusing to us as it is to the biggest bigot out there. We have to learn it as we're going along. So, I mean, to expect a child to actually say, "Oh, look, I'm trans. This is who I am. This is, this is what I want out of life." At a very young age, it's pretty much impossible. They're not going to be able to tell you that, and very few children are going to understand that.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. And a lot of times too, right? Like even if you do verbalize it in a sense, it's looked down upon even within the general organization of that religious structure as well. So a lot of times they would kind of try to dissuade you from being or from thinking those type of thoughts in the first place. Oh no, that's just a trend or something like that. That's just a phase. That's the word I'm looking for. It's a phase that'll pass, and then after you'll head back down the quote unquote normal path, whatever that is. Or whatever.
Did you ever have?
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to ask. Did you ever have like suicidal thoughts at that time?
At that time, I wouldn't say suicidal thoughts. There was self-harm, and I would get overly frustrated, and I'd either self-harm or I'd lash out with some violence or something like that. I was known as quite a temperamental child.
Was that like the main maybe symptom? Because I'm just thinking like people who may listen that have these sort of issues that they go through, maybe this could be something to help people, in that situation. Because I know with Jehovah's Witnesses, they wouldn't care. All they'd try to do is hide you and be ashamed of you, and wouldn't actually be there to support you, And so you have to identify, because the kid's not going to open up, like you said.
Yeah. So with me, I was temperamental, as I said. I lashed out with some violence when I got a little bit, when I got stressed and frustrated about myself, but I couldn't let any of that out. So a lot of what I did as a kid was to push myself more and more into the preferred gender role, into what they wanted to see. Push myself into that, be a good brother within the congregation, and just, study what that means and just try to personify that within myself. you know, and that worked for many. That worked for many years. The only place it didn't work was at home, where I needed a little bit of more freedom to do what I wanted, and although I tried to hide it a lot of the time, I couldn't hide it from those closest to me, like my stepmother and my father. And there was a lot of stuff that happened at home because of that, which just made things even more difficult. Which was all related to me being trans. So, you know, basically what happened there is from around about age 6, maybe 7, my stepmother had found a load of knickers in my room that I'd hidden that I used to wear when I was out and about. So I would never wear boxers or anything like that. I'd be wearing knickers out, you know, underneath my suit and all of that when I'm at the Kingdom Halls and at school and down, you know, out in the field service and stuff like that. She found all of them, and she had a bit of a talk with me. At first, she thought I was gay, but then sort of became, you know, later on, it became evident that it was something more than that. And that's when sexual abuse started. In her own words, she was going to make me have sex with a woman to prove to myself that I was male. She was going to make me into a man.
Wow, what?
That is weird.
That was in her own words.
That is wild.
So she, in and of herself, took it upon herself to say that, well, what you're doing or who you're portraying yourself as is not within the model that we have. So henceforth, I'm going to force you to do actions that are outside of your own, well, not outside of your own control, but against your own person, in a sense, in order to show that you are a man, in a sense.
Yeah.
In that
she also believed she used scriptures as well. So she used scriptures and to prove that she was doing it in the name of God. That, you know, she was doing it in the name of Jehovah, that this is what he'd want. He wanted everyone to, you know, you were born either male or female. And if you differed from that, you needed to be taught how to be that. And in her own messed up, fucked up way, she thought that the best way to do that was through sexuality. So, you know, that's what, you know, that's how she did it. I mean, I don't understand the psychology behind what she was doing. I mean, I'd have to be quite a good psychiatrist to be able to understand that, but that was the thing. But then she hid behind the religion as well. So the religion, even though they knew little bits about what was going on, they just like covered it up and so just sort of let it pass, you know.
So you're saying that the religious institution had little bits of information and little bits of knowledge that was coming on through to them that you were being abused in this way, but instead of actually taking action and reprimanding your stepmother, they just kind of covered it up and then was just like nothing was happening. And you yourself, well, actually, before I even assume that, did you also have to remain silent? Like, did they tell you that you had to remain silent as well? Or was it more in the extreme that because you were young, you remained silent on your own accord, and that's what they were hoping that you would do?
Yes, I would say the latter with that one. You know, I was worried more about living each day, keeping alive each day, living through what I was going through, because it wasn't just sexual, it was physical, it was emotional, it was completely a complete character tear down for like 10 years of my life. So I was just focusing on surviving each day to get out of the situation eventually. I didn't have time to sit back and think, oh, right, should I tell somebody about this?
Right.
You know, who would I go to? You know, planning for ahead like that. There was no chance of that.
Wow, that's a fearful life too.
Oh,
and
yes.
and it's there's a lot of shame attached to it, that it's very isolating and psychologically damaging.
Oh
You know,
yeah.
I couldn't imagine the that experience. That's
Yeah.
horrible.
And then, to top it off, because, I'm part of Jehovah's Witnesses at that time, and I'm got this trans identity that I'm trying to learn about in secret, in private. I'm trying to learn what it is, who it is that I am, because it's, it's not matching with what everyone else is thinking of me, what everyone else is seeing of me.
Yeah,
And uh, and I'm having to play into these gender roles just to survive. So I'm having to
yeah,
play into, and I mean, Scott, you're an ex-Jehovah's Witness,
hmm
what those gender roles are like, and I think we've
yeah,
talked about it before on this show.
exactly,
How
exactly.
strict they are. So it's, that's just makes everything even harder. And I
hmm
think back now, I don't know how I survived through all of that.
Right.
Sometimes it feels like a nightmare that, maybe did it happen? Maybe
Yeah.
it didn't happen. Well,
Like
it couldn't
surreal.
possibly have happened. Yeah. Surreal. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Because it sounds from what you're saying is that you kind of normalized it for so many years just as a way to get through it. Because
Hmm.
if you didn't, it would be traumatizing at that
Yeah.
moment consciously, and you couldn't afford to do that. You didn't have time for that. You were trying to survive each and every day, to really try to
Hmm.
introspect any further.
Yeah.
Um, so it's only until after you leave that I'm sure, the bottle comes open and everything just,
Yeah.
you know.
A psychologist, after I, later on, about 18-year-old, after I'd left the whole situation and everything, I'd gone to a psychologist, and a psychologist said that she was quite positive that I had Stockholm syndrome when I left
Hmm.
the
I'm
situation.
sure.
I was, when I actually left the situation, a lot of my family, like my grandmother and that, turned around and say, well, when you left the situation, you were actually in love with your stepmother. You had a lot of love for her and everything. So
Mm,
how is it that she's abusing you, like you say that she is?
mm.
Um, so
What?
but that's the definition of Stockholm syndrome, isn't it? So
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And hold on. There's also something that has been stated by Linear. Let me just check that
mhm,
out. Only one thing I can say is you have nothing to be ashamed of. Only your stepmother does for what she did.
Hmm.
mhm. Yeah,
That
it
I
took me many
completely
years to come to realize that.
Yep.
And I can get into that later, what happened afterwards and everything, but it
right.
did take many years for me to come to realize that. But now I
Hmm.
realize that, and I'm happy to talk about it.
Nice.
I
Right.
still get a little bit stressed and frustrated talking about it, but yeah.
And
No.
also, the other question is that how, because you were within Jehovah's Witness for quite some time, even into your
Hmm.
teens.
Yeah.
Now, when we
18 is when I left.
right, so that meant or actually, instead of just assuming, did you feel that your more feminine side was harder to repress when the older you got, in a sense, if that
Yes,
makes
definitely.
sense?
Oh, it does. It does. And uh, it's actually a point I wanted to bring up as well. For those who don't know a lot about how trans works, how it is that someone knows that they're trans. Um, it's a misconception that it's a choice, and it's not a choice. I can, quite fervently say that right now, because when you when you're trans, there's just something inside which is different,
Hmm.
and you'll try to fight it. Every trans person does. They'll try to fight this thing that's inside, this identity, It's not a chosen identity. It's not like the personality, I choose to like this band. I choose to like, this color. I choose. No, it's not like that. It's something deep inside, something from the subconscious, let's say, that sort of level, something that you can't control. It's involuntary. It means that all of your senses are all wrong. You look in a mirror at yourself. You don't see you see something else. It's it sort of makes you hallucinate in some senses, where you're seeing something completely different. And then the times that you do see what is actually there, it disgusts you. It's horrible. It's just not right. The name that you're given at birth, people referring to you by your pronouns and things like that. All of that just feels wrong. It's as if it takes you a few seconds to realize that someone's actually asking you a question, because in your head you're not that person. Your identity isn't that. It's like you're living the life of somebody else, and you're just in their body, just looking out of their eyes. And you're some other person inside, locked away in a prison that can't get out. You're screaming from inside, but nobody can hear you because they're hearing this other person. That's what it's like, and that's what it was like for me growing up. And as time goes on, yes, that voice gets stronger and stronger and stronger. It gets louder until you can't ignore it anymore. You can't push any further into the other person's life without losing yourself completely. And that's where the choice comes in, because at that point you've got to choose, well, do I push so far into somebody else's life that I become another person, that I become this person that's not me, that I'll never be able to feel anything again, I'll just be numb and miserable for the rest of my life? Or do I do something about it and release myself and show the world who I am?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the coming out part.
Yeah.
So, and that's the thing, like, because you put something out there that I wanted just to focus in on just a little bit, is that just like how you stated that you're not, it seems like you're not even the individual who has the pronouns that are given to them at birth, in a sense. And in that said, gender does not necessarily, you feel that doesn't necessitate to you, or it's not you, in a sense. And when I wanted to ask, and you kind of did answer by stating that it's kind of, you feel that you are lost within yourself, and you can't be who you want to be. But the question is that, does a person, because just like how you stated, you can continue going down the path to being this other person that is not you, in a sense, but wouldn't that mean that person is just living a lie? And at the same exact time, that they're not actually becoming that. It's only a facade that they are kind of following at that point.
Exactly,
right?
and that's the part that I mentioned there about you. If you just continue down that, you could probably live the life of the other person, and many trans people do for many, many, many years. They get married, they have kids, they'll live this other person's life. But but at some point you lose yourself. At some point you're gone. You're so buried deep, so far down, that you're not feeling anything anymore. That you as a person, your persona, your personality, your identity is just is no more. And for some people, they will at a later on in life, like for instance, Caitlyn Jenner. Later in life, they will come out and they will find themselves again. But by that point, they've got kids, families, marriages, freaking, a lot of baggage that they have to deal with. Baggage from another person that wasn't them to begin with.
Hmm.
And then obviously all of the emotional stuff that comes with that, because you've got other people's lives that are now affected by
just the way you are, who you are.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a deep that's just a deep thing to have to go through, this whole societal thing. But I think that what would help is to, first of all, change, if we can somehow change society from that
Mhm.
sort of you know mindset, because that's kind of where it's rooted in. And you can look at hundreds of different cultures in the world that also doesn't have just binary gender roles and things of that nature. There's other cultures around the world that
Mhm.
have always traditionally had more than one, gender, that people recognized others by with respect,
Yeah.
Mhm.
in a
And
respectful way. And it's just that in this culture, it's different. But, you know, I believe that I really hope that most people aren't hateful like that, and it's only consigned to like really religious fundamental type people, which are hopefully a minority. But I don't know. It's
yeah.
kind of weird when you look at the political situations too that
Oh, of course.
inform. Yeah.
The political situation right now is something which, is mainly the main reason I decided to want to do this stream tonight, is because of the media, the politicians. They all seem to be on a hate kick against trans people and trans rights,
Hmm.
and trying to shut down trans lives as much as possible.
Hmm.
Um, and I mean, maybe that doesn't look that way from their point of view, but that definitely is how it feels for people in my position,
Hmm.
as trans people. Definitely feels that way.
Well, I kind of, in my opinion, and I mean I could be wrong, and maybe I'm too optimistic, but I believe that just like with gay marriage and
Hmm.
accepting gay people as people, period. That took a long time, but it eventually happened for them. It
Oh
seems
yeah,
bleak at the time these things happen, but luckily we see like moral progress in the world, and
yeah. I have
that's
no
that's
doubt
informed
that.
by the cultures. Hopefully, the cultures can just catch on like like these other hundreds of cultures that already have. It can be done.
Yeah. I have no doubt that at some point in the future things will, we will gain full rights and everything.
Hmm.
I mean, we were getting close before all of this new, especially in the UK, we were getting quite close to full equality and everything,
Mm.
until the latest Conservative government came in and started
Mm.
shutting things down. But
Wow.
and especially with the media onslaught at the moment, the media
Mm.
only ever seems to have nasty things to say about trans people,
Mm.
which is then stoking up a lot of hate from the general population. Um,
Yeah, I mean it shouldn't even be a political situation. It's a humanist situation.
mhm.
It's about human rights. It's
Right.
nothing that should be politicized or debated or um
Yeah,
But
like
that
that. It's a humanistic.
especially when the politicians are going against the medical lobby. All of the top uh, medical universities, all of the top doctors, all the top medical institutions, and everything are all unanimous in saying that uh, gender affirming care is
Hmm.
the right thing to do.
Hmm.
right.
Hmm.
And yes, more research needs to go into why gender dysphoria is a thing, why people seem to be in the wrong body. Um,
Hmm.
no, more research does need to be done in that, but the care system that they've got right now is actually helping people. It
Yeah.
is solving a lot of people's problems and making people a lot happier in themselves.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't be
Mm,
getting rid of it. But the politicians like, no, we need to do more research in it, and then just let these people suffer while we do the research for the next few years.
And then
Yeah, but again, I think that just like how Scott Williamson said before, is that when you're delving into it, it's more of a cultural thing, right? And even though if we look at certain cultures around the world that do also have multiple different genders, for instance, there are still instances within those cultures that look down upon because they're influenced by Western culture in and of itself. So if they're influenced by Western culture, they will also nowadays look down upon that which is at some time was looked at as normal.
well, ironically, a lot of the countries I was referring to are not Western countries.
Right, but they're still affected, right?
Yeah,
Because
they were kind of like this way from traditionally, like from thousands of years ago.
all right,
yeah.
but I mean,
So
like Hinduism,
mostly the Asian countries.
Yes,
Yeah.
like Hindus, just like even if you look
Hindus,
at
Native
in India.
Americans, you know.
absolutely, but now, and that's why I was focusing on the cultural aspect, is because now since globalization has been so much of a force, there's been this kind of trend against these type of ideas, just like with India, for instance. There's been more and more persecutions against individuals who are looked at as trans and other things within India, where prior to that or whatever, there really wasn't that differentiation to begin with.
Katie and I know very well how religion tends to label different cultures as of the devil or of the world, or whatever, like under the influence of Satan, who's got the world in his hand or whatever. So these sort of people that really are the loudest are these fundamental type evangelical religious driven folks, I think,
Yeah.
in a lot of cases. And fortunately, I mean, over here in the USA, um it's like religion has really plummeted. People that identify as religious, and people like atheism and agnostics and people like that, unbelievers, have skyrocketed. you know and it's a good sign, that things will be moving in the right direction on that. But then you've got little cults like Jehovah Witnesses that just stick in there with that bigotry and create the kind of hell that Katie's describing, for people. And but luckily their numbers are dwindling terribly too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I just feel for those people who may be still trapped inside, who maybe have the same feelings.
Yep.
Whether it be the gender identity or whether it be, sexual identity. Anyone within the LGBT community who's trapped within a fundamentalist organization.
Yeah.
They need to be very careful about how they go about, presenting themselves, and how they go about, leaving the organization.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And the
And
last
just
thing that they want to do is kid themselves into thinking that they can actually stay within a fundamentalist organization and have their and come out about their identity, because that is not going to happen.
right. Right. Yeah, absolutely right. Based on that. Also, Linear stated something based on the politicians and stuff like that. So she wrote, yeah, some of these politicians, cough, Trump cough, think even adults shouldn't transition, which is
She meant to say bonkers.
yeah,
She meant to say
bonkers rather than conquerors. But still,
Yeah.
should be adults should be able to do anything they want as long as it only affects themselves.
Yeah,
So,
this is so true. It's like, this is why the danger of governments just inserting themselves into culture on cultural issues and things like that. They want to use their power to discriminate against groups of people, and they shouldn't have that power to come in and just do that. But with the special interest groups, religious groups that sway voters and sway people into And that's just something that we have to really, this is why we do this show, I guess, the Atheist Uprising. We try to shed light on these things and help people understand, these sort of topics.
Exactly.
I mean,
because
it's
I
a big
think
problem with
sorry.
especially with Trump. He's just a really good example of right-wing politics. And they will, right-wing politics, it may seem right, it may seem like they're making good points and things like that, but a lot of the time they're just using certain groups as political bait, so they
It's
can
not
just
their
maneuver certain
role.
groups.
Mm.
And that's dangerous, is when a politician who has a lot of power is wants more power, and they're willing to use an entire group of people without any regard for that group of people's feelings or their lives or anything like that. Just use them to get more power, more money.
Yep.
That's very dangerous.
That's it in a nutshell.
But exactly. But I think that's the huge problem, right? Is because individuals, I think, when they're constantly looking at society or cultures in a big way, and definitely when it comes to the United States, the UK, Canada, just the Western nations, and every nation for that matter, in some way or another, there's always this undercurrent which is there based on religious doctrine and religious ideology. And I think that one of the big reasons, and definitely when you're talking about a group of individuals that are, sadly to say, a minority within a minority, because even within the LGBTQ plus community, trans individuals aren't as many as they are with gays or with lesbians or with whatever the situation is. And it's, even though that we have that group that's there, a lot of the times that group is very fragmented within, and definitely sadly when it comes between bi and when it comes between trans, it seems the two lesbian and gay groups in a sense are more highly contra those other two than necessarily working with that group. So when everybody's kind of fragmented in a particular way, and then you have the religious undercurrent of things where they're kind of like, look, this is what is called quote unquote unnatural, and henceforth, and let alone, it's not only unnatural, but it's a smaller, not a smaller, but it's less than the subtotal of gays, lesbians, and other individuals which are out there. Now we can definitely highlight on them and be like, look, these are, and you don't want to do this, because if you open up that can of worms, then this and this can come, and that could come, and that could come down the road, and you don't want these type of things. So in a sense, I find that it's a religious scare tactics, because I do find that liberals are more or less open to that idea. And let alone socialists as well. But it's the more conservative individuals get, the more sort of doxastically closed they become. And from that, then they only have their own ideas, and things that don't coincide with their own ideas are looked at as either something to crush or something that just should not be there, and they will fight against it constantly. And I
that's
think
a very good point. I like that point at the end that you make there. If it's not something that's of their idea, I think that, like, in the media a lot, we're hearing a lot about these groups of feminists who have got together and are against trans rights and trans women in particular. I think a lot of their hatred comes from the fact, like you were stating about, it wasn't their idea. They're of the older generation. Feminism was their thing. Feminism, getting rights for women, was what was the most important thing, and quite rightly at the time. But now that women have a lot more rights, and in a lot of cases equal rights, You know, it's still not perfect, but you know that they feel that trans people are coming in and taking away some of their limelight, taking away some of their power away from them.
Mhm. Well, and like we were talking about before, they anything that's going to escalate their power, and the way they get power is they get support, they get funding, they get votes, they get representation. You know, all of this stuff, and the way they do that is going to be by being the originator of the good ideas, to be the machine that they can count on to look good in every situation. That's why we have all these scandals and all these political, commercials, the little gotcha moments and this and that and this and that. Everyone's wanting to make the right decision. Like, say, for example, really quick, like this whole balloon getting shot down over um, the Atlantic, this Chinese surveillance balloon, right? Um, that becomes, Biden's like, oh, I want to shoot it down quick because then the Republicans are going to charge me for not shooting it down early in the game. And I don't want that political fallout. But then the Pentagon was like, no, we need to wait because it could have a EMF bomb on it or some other thing that's going to cause problems for people on the ground, And so they made the decision to shoot it down over the ocean or whatever. So, anyways, those sort of things is what goes through the president and the politicians' minds. Not actually what's good for people, but what they think is going to help them politically.
Yeah, what's going to get them the most votes in the next election?
Correct.
Absolutely. But at the same time, I look at it still being, because that's the one thing. I think that politics and religion are very close, entangled with each other. And definitely when both individuals and sometimes both sides try to show how religious they are, in a sense. So you can see that Joe Biden is a Catholic, for instance, I believe, or a Protestant. I forget which one he is. But a lot of times you can kind of see that, like, they in their own way try to argue through their policies what is the best way to represent their belief, in a sense. And when we really delve into that, we get to see this kind of larger issue. It's not that the organization or the political organization is corrupt, is that the political organization has an influx of religious influence behind it, right? And if that religious influence has a surge of rightist voters or leftist voters or whatever the situation is, then all of a sudden the politics changes or whatever. And from there, you get to see, based on how they produce or not produce, but how they put in their policies, how that influences the nation, and not only the nation, but the international community as a whole. And that's why I do think that, again, the main issue needs to be focused on religion and the religious ideas that come from these underground type of religious thought processes which are there and that are still relevant and are still strong today. And I think those are the hindering forces that hinder us from moving forward and progressing in a proper way and allowing for trans rights and allowing for individuals to put more money into infrastructure and everything like that, because their number one thing is, if you're highly religious, well, this life means nothing at all anyways. They won't say that out loud, but the reality of the situation is that this life means nothing. It's literally just a test. So while we're going along through this test, I'll do whatever I want with this particular life that I'm given or this particular avatar I'm given, So.
Yeah, I think the first steps towards that is to allow more trans people to have a voice, to help more trans people out of the situations that they maybe are in, and to give us a bigger voice, allow us to talk, allow us to educate people, through our transitions, to educate people in who we are, we mean, what we mean, what it is to be trans and things like that. Because with that education, then it's going to breed a lot more understanding. It's going to breed a lot more empathy from the population, and that will eventually move into a political sphere. Because then it'll be a vote winner for politicians.
Right.
But the most important thing is to actually help trans people, is to give them more safe spaces, to give them more help, whether that be physically or whether that be psychologically, because there's a lot of pain in living as a trans person, and a lot of trans people do not have the confidence to deal with things on their own because of what it is that they've been through, the abuse that they've gone through in one form or another. I mean, my abuse was quite severe, but there's other abuses against trans people. Before you come out as trans, pretty much everything that happens to you in life is an abuse to you. Because everyone's misgendering you, everybody's referring to you by the wrong name, everybody's treating you under a gender role which is not yours whatsoever. So everything is an abuse to you at that point.
Absolutely.
And the more time that goes by, the worse that's going to get. The worse the feelings are going to get. The worse the more that your emotions are going to break down. I mean, in my case, for instance, as I said earlier, I pushed into Jehovah's Witnesses a lot more throughout my childhood, and hid a lot of my feelings and everything, and hid who I was from those closest to me and those around me. But that came to a head when I was 18. I'd left the abusive situation. I was living with my grandmother, and I tried to commit suicide. I was in hospital for a few days after taking 50 paracetamol and 30 ibuprofen, which was enough to kill a rhino. I was told by a doctor. In fact, they were very surprised I wasn't dead when I turned up at the hospital. But yeah, that's I tried to do that, and that was because everything had just got too much. It wasn't because of the abuse that I'd suffered. I'd dealt with that, and in my own way, I'd like sort of that was normality to me. What was stressing me out was not being who I was. I couldn't. I didn't know how to relate to anything in life. I was completely I was so disconnected from everything that the only way out was death to end it all. And that's what happens a lot of the time with trans people, is they will try to commit suicide. If you make them bury themselves, if you make them hide themselves, or you put them through conversion therapy or what have you, it's not going to solve anything. All that's going to happen is that they're either going to lose themselves completely, or they're going to try to commit suicide.
Yeah.
Right. But you... Sorry about that. Go ahead, Scott.
I was just going to say that's the harm of religion, essentially, too. And especially as it relates on this topic.
Absolutely. But Katie, do you think that there's any way for these religions to reform themselves in a particular way in order to accept individuals,
you mean around the trans issue?
Their flock? Yes.
Yeah. So obviously I've studied the Bible a lot as a Jehovah's Witness, and there isn't one verse in the Bible that mentions trans people. There also isn't one verse in the Bible that mentions gay people. So I think that's quite evident. The Bible never mentioned it because it was never a problem in biblical times. Homosexuals existed, trans people existed, and as Scott mentioned earlier, with these other cultures, people knew that they existed. but it wasn't a problem to anybody, so it was never written into books like the Bible. Nowadays, obviously, certain scriptures are interpreted to be against trans people and be against homosexuality. For instance, man must not lie with a man, was a famous one. But in the original text, that was in the original Hebrew, that was referring not to homosexuality, that was referring to incest. So once you look through the whole thing at the actual original meanings, there is no problem with either homosexuality or transsexuality. And religions need to realize that, and at that point they could accept trans people and homosexuals a lot more readily. In fact, with homosexuals, there is some religions, Christian religions, that are accepting homosexuals now. Like the Church of England, for instance, and stuff. So
we have the Universalist denomination. That's a worldwide church, and they accept homosexuals, trans people, even agnostics and atheists in their church. So they're very, very ultra liberal type of church. So it's possible,
Right, but the thing is that, and I think this is the most hardest thing, right? Is that if it's already written, and if a lot of people use the King James Bible in order to, and definitely if you're within the United States, Canada, or the UK in particular, the King James Bible is something that definitely influences a lot, and even Australia. How did I forget about Australia? Is influenced by this Bible. And within it, it does talk about homosexuality being a sin and everything like that. So even though that we can go back and look at the original literature and say, look, this is the reality of it, the thing is that the translated version given down from or during the time of King James to now, in a sense, this is the Bible that we have to work with. And I think that is the problem, is that when it's written down in such a way where now it says that this is an abomination, that being gay is an abomination within this biblical literature, then I can see how they can make a correlation with, well, if this is an abomination, then obviously this is an abomination as well, which includes trans individuals and everything like that, even though that it's not mentioned.
But for for a lot of it, it's it's interpretation, as I said.
Oh, of course.
And interpretation is very easily for someone to come along and interpret it differently. I mean, how did the King James Bible get written? Someone interpreted the version before it in a certain way and created a new version for it.
Of course.
So it's very simple to do. It's just Scott. I think Scott put summed it up brilliantly earlier with culture. And if the culture changes, so if the culture within the religion changes, and the hearts and minds of the followers change, then eventually if enough of that culture changes, then the translation is going to change as well.
Yes.
Absolutely, and I agree with that. But the one thing is that the difficulty is that when you have something that is written, right, that is the difficulty, because during King James's time, it was very difficult to actually have these works of literature written down at that particular time. And then you had the printing press that just went ham with printing out, at least within North America and England and Australia, printing out these King James Bibles in order for everybody to have them, in order for them to interpret the word of the Bible in their own way. That's the difference between Protestantism and
I think
Catholicism
today, though. I think the difference today, though, is that we have something that's even, just as powerful, or even more powerful than, say, it is written, like in the Bible or something like that, and that is celebrities. A lot of people put so much credit into celebrity life and follow celebrities pretty much like a religion. You know, these celebrities are like saints of old, you know, but for the modern era. So, you know, and a lot of celebrities are supporting the LGBT and are pushing towards that way. And we've seen with that you know, hearts and minds of people that follow them are also changing and also following that. So the more that goes on and the more that we promote that, you know, the easier it's going to be for change to happen within religion, for instance.
Right. But I think that in order, because don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that religions can't change, and obviously religions can, but the influence of religions and even the influence of a small group of individuals, the ultra conservative and the conservative individuals, still have massive amounts of sway within the political system of today, and they are much more capable of violence than the left is, in a sense.
Oh, yeah.
So if they really do want to change something, they can. And June 6th was a great, well, not a great, but it was a very good example of what the right can do if push came to shove, in a sense.
Yeah.
So the whole entire outlook, for instance, needs to be that you're dealing with individuals that are wanting and who are capable of such extreme violence and such extreme actions that it at some instances, it doesn't necessarily matter how big the group is. It only matters how successful the group is when they act in a particular way and everything like that. And I think that's what history has shown, is that you don't necessarily need the masses of people in order for something to work out in your favor. All you just need is to be the most violent out of the whole entire group, and most people just submit to whatever you try to do. So if that is the case, the argument needs to be, well, how can we uphold and continue to espouse progress, but also to protect it as well? Because progress in and of itself is a very fickle thing and can definitely change into regress if any small group is able to hold power within a particular nation or country for a long duration of time and everything. So that's, I think, and that goes with trans issues as well, because I think that at this very moment, a lot of people were like, well, how could Donald Trump come in? Look at how much we've progressed so far. And then all of a sudden we got hit with that bus and we were just like, holy shit, how did that happen? You know, we're so progressive. And even with the UK, for instance, with the separation from the EU and everything. And not only that, but then after you had Boris Johnson doing what Boris Johnson was doing, you know, so like
that's a sore point.
It really shows that it doesn't, a small group of individuals can win if they create coalitions, and if those coalitions are strong enough in order to sway enough people to win the vote. And then things can completely change from that day forward. And just like with the United States, the Supreme Court is going to stay that way for 40 years or something like that, maybe even a bit longer, while the Supreme Court nominees are still within power and stuff like that. There's no way that you can get them out of the Supreme Court. So that's what I'm trying to say, is that it's so difficult sometimes when we talk about progress, and then you can see how fickle progress really is when some other small group is able to take control and then just shake the living shit out of it to such an extent that when it comes out, you're like, okay, wow. This is what I thought progress was, and now somebody like him can come into power. It doesn't make any sense.
I think it would be a very interesting conversation if we were to be able to get a social psychologist and a political political analyst onto the show and actually discuss that particular topic. So that's quite an in-depth topic, and one that I wouldn't even begin to say that I could answer.
Right.
You know,
Right. That's what I was thinking too. And that's what I do want to do. But back towards the trans issue, because that's what that whole entire rambling was about, was also about trans issues as well. Because when we really look at it, people in and of themselves change their ideas on constantly, in a sense. And sometimes they are for something, and at a certain age they are against it, and then after at some other point in their life they're for it again, or they stay against it,
yeah,
or whatever the situation may be. And the question kind of is that how do we kind of like put a proper bow around the trans issue? And meaning, what I mean by bow is that how do we deliver this issue in a particular way that can make people understand that particular issue at hand, right? Like how
yeah. So, as I was mentioning earlier, the first thing I think to do is to support, trans people. You know, there isn't very many of us. In fact, we make up 1.6% of the population. So very, very small. So the first thing to do is to support us, is to, uh, you know, uh, get the right care for trans people, and the right mental health support as well for a thing, and then build up the confidence of trans people so they can speak their stories, so that they can inform the world of what it is that they've gone through, the feelings that they've had, why it is the way they are, the abuses that have been committed against them, and things like that. But then there's not very many of us. So the next step is for supporters of LGBT, of trans people, for those supporters to also speak up, to also mention trans rights wherever they can. Where down the pub, or in the street, at their political meetings, write letters to their MPs or to their what is it in America, congressmen or what have you.
right.
And just drum up support for the trans community, because there's going to be a lot more of those people, and the more that happens, the more that it becomes a normality. One of the biggest things as a trans person, one of the biggest comments I get from people online who are against trans people is that it's not normal. Is that they have never heard of it before, and that they don't like it now it's come to them. One of the things with human psychology is that we like things that we are used to, and we will always try to stick with what we're used to. We don't like that change. We don't like that the abnormality. We don't like that feeling of not knowing. And so the more that you can build up the knowledge of trans issues, the more people will become used to it. The more it'll be viewed as normal within society, and then you can start talking about equal rights and all of that and everything. I mean, that's exactly what happened with homosexuality. Is it eventually it became more normal, and then they were able to go for gay marriage and things like that.
Okay, so it's kind of like what you're trying to propose is normalize trans issues in a sense
Exactly.
to
Yeah.
show
Of course.
that. Okay,
Mhm.
which
It's not talked about a lot. A lot of people, online in the certain areas. I mean, there's a lot of the transphobic people will say, well, it's talked about all over the place, but only because they're going searching for it.
Mhm.
right.
They're looking at the forums where it's being talked about. And one of the things within the within the trans community that we always talk about is how most of the forums are gatekept by trans people, and nobody who's not trans is not allowed in them. And it's all these like little private spaces and online that nobody else is allowed into. That's not the right way to do it if you want to get if you want to get rights, if you want to normalize who you are, sitting in a corner in the dark in the middle of nowhere where nobody can listen to you, no one can see you, and no one's allowed within 100-mile radius of you. Well, yeah, no one's going to know who you are at that point.
Right.
And then, for supporters of trans people, it's still not a lot. They don't mention it a lot. They don't, they say, oh, well, I'm a supporter of LGBT, and then just go on to talk about homosexuality as if that's even the same thing. Whenever trans issues comes up, it always jumps to homosexuality. And for a lot of trans people, we're not homosexual. We're heterosexual. We can also be asexual. We have the same range of sexuality as cisgendered people do.
Yeah, and I mean, people out here, not only are they ignorant about that, much less they think that any of this stuff, even homosexuality, especially within religious communities, they feel it's just like some sort of fetish, like it's some kind of sexual phase or thing you want to experiment with, and now you're trying to use it as a badge of honor or something. Like they really go deep with their insults,
which is completely false.
Yes, and it's just really nobody's kicking back enough on that. I don't think you've got all these people out here and people that don't know any better. They're so easy. It makes sense to them because, hey, I'm not gay, or I'm not trans, or I'm not this or that. So that makes sense to me. These people are crazy, and it's like they're appealing to the lowest denominator of human being, or human empathy. It's like, it's really sad. And like Katie says, we need to do more to, educate the public, the culture. We need to change everything, man. It comes with learning and discussing things out in the open.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, the recent research that I've been looking into, I mean, there's very, very little research done into gender dysphoria and gender identity. A lot of it's done on the social science side of it. So what I'm studying at the moment, social psychology, it's done a lot more on that side of it. And you're not looking to prove anything in that. That's just making claims and providing evidence for the claims. So you're not looking to prove anything. So the actual research being done by neuro biology at the moment and neuroscience into gender dysphoria is actually very interesting. Because what they're finding is it seems to be, from all of the research that they've done up until now, that there's an actual part of the brain, and they think they've identified it. They're running further tests and studies and stuff to make sure that they have. But they think they found the part of the brain which actually holds an identity, which actually holds its sexuality. So gender and sexuality would be part of this identity. And it's not the person's personal identity, because that's part of the conscious. That's something that's developed through the environment, through environmental stimuli, as the person's growing up from birth onwards. This is an identity which is the brain's identity, which is the identity, fundamental from conception onwards. An identity that's always there and always will be there and cannot change.
Well, I don't think our buddy Eric Hernandez would agree with that.
Well, he can disagree all he likes, but like when I had the
remember the piano analogy, remember?
Like when I was having my discussion with him before, he can disagree all he likes, but neuroscience is of a different mind to him.
That's right.
And unlike him, they have proof.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Kind of lends credibility to the whole thing, Yeah, it's people just need to be educated on a number of things, that all tie in together to understand the nature of what it means to be a human being. It's not just so simple. We are very complex organisms. That's the hallmark of this evolutionary process over millions of
Yeah.
years. And when you deny all that stuff, you're denying evolution. You have to get with the program and understand that human beings are part of nature. We're not outside of nature like spirits and gods. We're
Yeah.
products of the puddle. We're just we have a lot of natural reasons that give rise to all sorts of possibilities with us. And when people can get out of this simplistic thinking and just make
Yeah.
science a thing now, but it's like there's so much hyper skepticism out here where people are science deniers. They don't believe in the media. They don't trust the government. They don't trust any of our what used to be the pillars of our civilization. Science projects, the project of science, all of this stuff is under scrutiny. It feels like as time goes on, which is really weird.
I think a good comment to bring up would be Calder Pizza's comment here.
Yeah, many PIMI, well, I don't know what that means, JWs.
Physically in, mentally in. Yeah.
I'm physically in, mentally in. Okay, JW's only exposure to transgenderism is through public talks littered with opinions and biases, which only perpetuates their views on LGBTQ and makes them scoff at these issues.
Yes, it's a joke for them.
Exactly. And, a lot of the reason why it's, opinions and biases is, well, it's twofold. One, there isn't a lot of research done into this. Now, to get the research, you need to build up public opinion, like I was mentioning before, and then eventually it will become an incentive for more money to be plumbed into research. But then also because a lot of what this can only be explained through opinions and biases when the research isn't there. This is people's personal experience. All I can do is, I can't prove to you that I'm trans. I can't do that. All I can do is explain how I feel and what it was like for me growing up and my journey. I can't just rip off my top right now and stand here naked in front of you and you go, oh yeah, that person's trans. It doesn't work like that. There's no physical proof of it. It's all hidden deep within the brain somewhere.
That's definitely true. And
But
I think
and
that's the hard thing. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, sorry. No, you go ahead. I was
No, you were speaking. I'll talk after.
Yeah, I do like Calder Pizza's comment there because that is a very good point, and it does perpetuate, the what is being spoke about on the platform and things like that, about homosexuality, about transsexuality and stuff. It just emphasizes to them, what they're being told by the organization.
Exactly. And that's why too, right? When we really look at it, the really sad thing about individuals who are from Jehovah's Witness or of any other type of cult to begin with, and even other religions, and then they delve into the public talks, and just like how Colder Pizza expressed, how you have all these different ideas of what trans are that aren't necessarily from trans themselves. It's just the ideas from non-trans individuals, and then people are like, oh well, that person seems to have it right, or that person seems to have it right, or whatever. It's kind of just you pick and choose towards what your bias is, and you don't necessarily look at the science behind the actual issues.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of it comes down to the psychology of, well, if you don't understand, if you can't understand how it feels to be a certain way, then you're already predisposed to having a bias against it, because you personally can't understand it, and that's something which, as human beings, we don't like. We don't like that feeling of not knowing.
Oh, big time, big
Yeah.
time. And I think that's because we like stories as human beings. A lot of times, stories is a way that we try to express ourselves. And science at certain points is too, I think it's not that it's too logical, but it's too matter of fact. It's not a story. So anybody who can create a story or whatever by using pseudoscience or using science towards at least the extent that they want science to work for them, and then they kind of forget all these other tests, not tests, but all these other experiments and everything like that. What we slowly start to see is that people start to win over other individuals, even though that they might be talking nonsense, because they haven't really looked into it to its entirety. And a lot of people want models to look to. They don't want to do the research themselves. They want other people to tell them what the research is. So if one person seems to hit that bias and they're like, no, I really like this guy, and that's predominantly what it's going to change.
Sadly, that guy tends to be Jordan Peterson when it comes to trans issues.
Right? Exactly. And I think that's the thing. And also, there's been the kind of how Scott stated this flip on its head of societal norms in a sense, but not only just that, but also of scientific norms. And there's these other individuals coming out of the woodwork stating that either the science is wrong or there's more intricate sciences or there's more ways of looking at psychology and stuff like that. And there's I can't even speak. Jesus. Psychological, I guess you can say, stands.
That's what I was about to chime in on. I'm glad you mentioned that. That's the one thing I keep forgetting to mention is that part of the solution can be to meet people where they are, at least for the sake of education and addressing sincere questions and sincere issues that people have with things they don't understand. It's kind of like when you talk to theists, you don't just go into the conversation with the approach of, oh, I'm going to teach you the facts because you don't have it. And it may not have their issue may be psychological. It has nothing to do with the facts. It could have nothing to do with that. It could have something to do with the way they think they're connecting the dots. And again, this is where techniques like street epistemology can come into play to kind of understand where they're coming from and kind of understand how they're reasoning into um, the anti-trans or anti-gay or whatever the case is. There that this is how you discover how we can begin to address it. We have to really give them the freedom to talk about these issues without getting on the defensive, because I know it can be offensive. Some people may not understand the use of pronouns, for example,
Mhm.
and they have their reasons for that. It may not be that they're intentionally being a bigot, but it could be some other thing that we can address and maybe help them understand a little better. You know what I mean? And that's probably the best way to approach, or that's one of the, I wouldn't say the best way, but that's definitely one of the ways that we can keep in mind, because it's like you said, there's a psychological component there that has nothing to do with the facts. We got to understand what is that.
Exactly. And kind of like how Calder Pizza stated right here, I think what many people don't understand is that answers can't be God magic or Holy Spirit. It needs to be rooted in reality. If your
Mhm.
answers are illogical and relies on things that don't work with with reality, then those aren't answers, it's delusions. So I do agree with that, absolutely. But I think that what Scott's trying to say is that there's different ways to show people that their answers aren't logical, aren't logically.
Well, I would
You've got to
say
deal
just,
with
I
a
don't.
delusion, with somebody
Yeah,
who's
you.
delusional. You've got to deal with it in a careful, subtle manner.
Yeah,
If
you know.
if you play too much into the delusion will just become worse.
Right.
Yeah, it's
You,
like if they're expressing to you that their psychological reason for being anti-trans is religion or scripture or something, then you can start addressing that, because you've got to get rid of that part. You've got to show them how that's not going to work. You know,
absolutely.
and through again, tools like street epistemology can be helpful in
Yeah.
that, but unfortunately it doesn't work for most
Basically,
people.
you've got to find what the authority is that they're basing
Yes.
their
Yep.
delusions on, and then tackle that
That part.
authority.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
exactly it. So the first part of street epistemology is more questions in order
Mm-hmm.
to get to
To that
the
part. Yeah.
real issue. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, we can then look at the issues at hand and kind of show them nicely towards a certain extent where they're going wrong with their ideas, though not being this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, but just being like, look, now where does it say, let's just say in the Bible, that a person can't be trans? Show me a scripture, and after we'll talk about it. But if there's nothing like that inside the Bible, then you can work along with that and kind of show individuals that if it's not written in the Bible, then where are you getting your ideas from? Where are you getting this? Well, it's in the Bible, or God despises this. Why? You know.
Interestingly enough, with Jehovah's Witnesses, I did that. I did that with a elder and a pioneer, a special pioneer, who'd come to my door to speak to me. I invited them in, and I actually went through all of this, and they couldn't find a scripture. They tried, bless them. They definitely tried, but they could not find one scripture that was against trans people. They just kept going to the homosexual thing.
Right.
And they just stuck on that point fervently. I was telling them, look, I'm not homosexual. I'm not even sexual. I'm asexual. I don't even have a sexuality. And they're like, yes, but it's wrong to be homosexual. And I'm like, well, I don't think you're quite listening to me here. And in the end, we just had to agree to disagree. But
I think just like with street epistemology, it takes time and process, and it takes a certain amount of process in order for it to really be understood, right? Like if it's only a one time that you're talking with this particular individual, then it's not going to work in that way, which we think that it might. Like a lot of people who,
interestingly, on that point,
yeah,
if I can just put in there, sorry about that.
no, go ahead.
Interesting on that point, not long after that conversation, so maybe about a month, maybe 2 months after that conversation, my grandmother, who was in the same congregation as that elder, rang me up and said, I've got good news for you. And I was like, okay, what's this good news? It's like, well, I've just been told that if you once you've had your operation, you'll be able to come back as a sister, as a different person, because you'll be a different person then. So you can come back, and you can live as a sister within the congregation, and that'll be fine. Which I was like quite astonished at, because that's very different. I mean, have you come across that before, Scott? I mean, that's very different to what I was taught when I was a kid.
Yeah. I don't know. Repeat that one more time, because I want to understand exactly what you mean.
So she said that if once I've had the operation, so right now I'm disfellowshipped and everything from the
Mm-hmm.
thing for being trans and an atheist and everything else that they stitched me up on, but she said, once I've had the operation, I will then. She was told by the elder that once I've had the operation, I'll be a different person, so I'll be able to rebaptize myself as a sister in the organization.
Oh, I see what they're saying.
Yeah. So it was like a weird angle that they were taking on it.
Yeah,
like,
that sounds kind of like a weird way around the problem, like you're trying to justify it somehow.
But I just wonder whether it was something that I'd said to them when they come round my house. You know, something I was pointing out, and they couldn't actually find anything against being trans, so it made them go away and think a little bit more in depth. You know, and then obviously, like, send it higher up the food chain and see what happened. But not that I'd ever go back. I'd never want to go back. As a sister or not. Anyway, why would I want to be a sister in Jehovah's Witnesses? It's an awful existence.
Yeah, that'd be the worst thing you could do. Wow. Yeah. That is interesting as a way to justify and solve the problem. It's just so funny how people have to go through such mental gymnastics to make all of this stuff work, you know.
Yeah, it's really true. And I think that's one of the big issues. It's just, oh, hold on. We got another one from Colder Pizza. Let me hit this one up before I start. I was never an elder when I was in PIMI. I was a servant. But I know for a fact that you wouldn't be able to be rebaptized. You would be disfellowshipped almost guaranteed.
And that's what I always thought.
Right.
You know, so I don't know what this group of elders was doing. Well, what I don't even know whether they'd kicked it up to the district overseer or anything like that. So.
Oh, yeah. The only way to get rebaptized is if you change your identity and move somewhere no one knows you.
And I think that's the point that they were trying to draw on. Although I'd been in that congregation when I was younger, I think they were drawing on a little bit on the fact that I was a lot younger then. I'm a lot older now, and that I look completely different. So I'd basically be able to go in with a new name, with a new identity altogether. And nobody would be able to recognize me. So that was like the part of the loophole that they were trying to put me through. But as I've already said, I wouldn't do that. I mean, I'm atheist. Why the hell would I go back? And even if I did go back, why would I go back as a woman? It would be terrible.
No, exactly. But I think like what they're trying to do, which kind of makes sense, but at the same exact time kind of shoots them in the foot towards a certain extent too, is that they're realizing that they are losing congregants. So the one way in order to try to improve that is through changing certain practices so that at least it might give you another thing to think about. Be like, wow, okay, well, now they're accepting me for who I am. And yes, I might need to move somewhere else, but I'm still going to be part of this air quote family, you know, or this organization which is there. So I think all in all, if we really look at it, it's a sleight of hand and is definitely a sense of deception to get individuals back into the mix, because they know, I think for a fact, that for individuals who have left, it is extremely difficult to find another community that's like the Jehovah's Witness or like these other religious organizations and stuff. So they're kind of just playing a little game and being like, okay, well, if we pull on this string, will they come back? If I pull on this string, will they come back? And they're just going to continue tugging until one day somebody's just going to be like, you know what? I don't have anything outside of it. I'll go back in, you know?
Yeah. And to Calder Pizza's last comment here. But if they know that you're trans, they certainly won't let you have any privilege. I wouldn't have imagined that they would. I think it would be a bit easier for them to make the argument that they were making in my position, being male to female transsexual, because at the end of it, after the operation and everything, I wouldn't have any privileges as a sister anyway within the organization. But I think it would be very different the other way around. Female to male transsexual, because then there would be a massive question around whether or not this person would be able to have any privileges, like saying a prayer or having doing the collection at the Kingdom Hall, or speaking on the platform or something like that.
Right. So, just if there's anything that both of you want to state before the show ends, because it is an hour and 31 minutes, and I do want to keep both of your times into consideration. And it is 9:20, and I know that it is a work day tomorrow, so I don't want to.
Well, we got more into politics on this one. There is other things that I would like to talk about, but maybe we could do that on another show, because I would like to talk about, my recovery from my recovery and my transition. From the recovery from the abuse that I suffered, and the transition that I've subsequently gone through, and still going through it, actually. But to get to where I am now, because I think that could also be very helpful for certain people.
Yes,
and it's also getting more knowledge out there about it. But obviously, that would take about another hour. So
right.
I don't think us or the viewers want to be here for another hour. So
right. And I mean, I don't mind pushing it a bit, but I know that, like, with what you're doing and stuff like that with school, and let alone
I do have some uni work to do tomorrow.
So I don't want to keep you up and going, and then tomorrow you're exhausted for what you need to do. So we'll end it this will be a part 1 of the next part, which will be a part 2. We focus on the political aspect. We focus on the issues which trans individuals need to face when it comes to politics, and definitely when it comes to society and culture. But I think next show we can then really focus on the other aspect, which is the kind of, as you stated, the rebuilding of yourself after leaving institutionalized religion and stuff like that, and really just constructing your image back up again. And Scott, is there anything that you would like to say before we end, my friend?
No, I'm good, man. I'm just happy to be here. That's all I can really say. And always carry on a nice conversation with you guys and girls. And it's just one of those things that I like to do, especially when I have time. I wanted to jump in yesterday, but I was so tied up with stuff.
No, it's understandable. It's understandable.
Yeah. But today
we
I was
didn't actually
free,
have a show yesterday, so it's all good.
okay.
But next week we're going to have a couple of shows that I have in mind, and if you guys want to help me out with that, that would be fantastic.
I'm happy to do so.
Absolutely. So, first off, what I would like to let everybody know within the chat, and also in this panel discussion that we're having right now, we do have a new Discord channel for the Atheist Uprising. So if you want to join into our Discord channel, the link is in the private chat, and also the link is in the chat at the bottom. This is the link for our Discord. If you do want to join in, more the merrier. And because we are really trying to create a Discord that's going to be community driven, but at the same time, what we want to try to do is have fruitful discussions within the Discord as well. So it's going to be really interesting and really exciting as the show progresses and as the Discord progresses along with the show. We're hoping to get more individuals in and more individuals having fruitful discussions and stuff.
But the good thing about Discord is that we could do after parties and stuff over on Discord as well.
Right. And that was the one thing that I was thinking too, is having after parties, maybe an after party on Discord or an after party on YouTube, because I really do want to start having after parties on YouTube.
Yeah.
But
great.
even after parties on Discord is good as well. The other thing that I want to say is that the shows that are happening next week, Saturday and Sunday, are going to be extremely interesting because I'm working on it right now, but I'm pretty sure that I can get it. I'm talking to Dr. Josh, and I want to try to get Dr. Josh on the show. So if we can
my
get
favorite guest.
Yes. And then I'm wanting on Sunday to get back with what's his name? Now I'm forgetting his name.
Rogers.
Only me.
Greg Rogers?
Not Greg Rogers, the other one. Jim
Barrows?
No, not Jim Barrows. Damn it. I forget what. Jimbo Jones. The individual that talks about drugs and how they can bring you to a higher level of existence and transcendence and everything like that. I want him back on the show in order to actually
It's just chemicals in the brain. It's just altering of chemicals in the brain.
Exactly.
That's what it does.
But that's the thing.
Effect.
So I want to have a conversation with him again because he did want to have another conversation. So I just want to reach out and have those two shows, one on Saturday with Dr. Josh and on
Can I help with Dr. Josh? I'd rather help with Dr. Josh, to be fair.
Sounds like a plan. All right. So with everybody else, I just wanted to tell you, thank you so much for watching. It's been amazing. Thank you for your support. And Katie and Scott, thank you so much for being on here and having this wonderful conversation with me. And Katie, thank you for suggesting to having this wonderful conversation to begin with. And yeah. So all in all, we are going to really start focusing on, and slowly but surely, I do want to get into more conversations with theists and bring in more theists into the show. So it's going to be really good and a great new turn of events with the actual Atheist Uprising. Because just like how Scott Williamson stated, we can't just be kind of just ourselves having these type of conversations. We need to also reach on the outside and get other people's opinions and have discussion based on those opinions.
Yep.
But as for now, I hope you both have a great night, and thank you so much, everybody, and have a great week. Now, let me just figure out how the hell to do this. 1 second. All right, put that back.